Our film starts with a boy named Bastian. He's a quiet, introverted 10-year-old who absolutely loves reading. He lives with his widowed father, but Bastian's dad has one big problem with him. Bastian is always lost in fantasy books and daydreams, and he couldn't care less about school, so Bastian heads to school, and on the way he gets bullied. The kids grab him, trying to steal his money, but since he doesn't have any, they hold him down and literally throw him into a trash bin. Bastian crawls out, runs for his life, and hides inside an old bookstore. That's where he meets Mr. Coriander, the kind of man who clearly doesn't like kids, and he tries to kick him out. But the moment he realizes Bastian actually loves books, he decides to let him stay in the shop. Mr. Coriander is sitting there reading a book called The Never-Ending Story, and when Bastian asks if he can read it too, Coriander refuses. He tells him this book is dangerous, but Bastian's a little troublemaker. The second Mr. Coriander turns his back, Bastian grabs the book, steals it, and runs. Still, he leaves a note behind, apologizing for taking it. After that, Bastian goes to school and sneaks into an old storage room so he can read the book in peace, and he starts reading. Now at this point, we're going to leave Bastian for a while and jump straight into the world inside the book, a journey powered by Bastian's imagination. In a magical forest in the land of Fantasia, a huge rock-eating giant appears. He asks the creatures living there to let him stay with them, and then he starts devouring the rocks around them. When they try to stop him, he tells them his homeland doesn't have any rocks left anymore. That's when all the creatures warn him about something called the Nothing, a force that's destroying everything. They tell him they're on their way to meet the Empress to warn her. So the creatures reach the Empress's palace, and there, they discover that many other beings have already arrived too, all of them coming to ask for her help. But then the Empress's assistant shows up, and he tells them the Empress is sick, seriously sick. He says she's suffering from a deadly illness because of the Nothing. Still, he mentions that there is a great warrior, someone strong enough to face what's happening, and that warrior is a little boy named Atreyu. The creatures panic, because how is a child supposed to save them? But the assistant orders Atreyu to go on a mission, find a cure for the Empress, and save Fantasia from the Nothing. Atreyu asks, when do I leave? And the assistant replies, right now. Then he hands him a powerful amulet called Auron and sends him off. And the moment Atreyu begins his journey, we see the Nothing summon a savage wolf, just to hunt Atreyu down and kill him. A week into the trip, Atreyu still hasn't found the cure, so he stops to rest for a bit with his horse, because at the same time, Bastian is actually asleep. And the second Bastian wakes up and continues reading, Atreyu's journey continues too, all while that terrifying wolf is still out there, tracking him and getting closer. Atreyu finally reaches the first monster on his path, a massive turtle named Morla living in the swamps of Sadness. And this place is brutal, because if Sadness takes over anyone here, they simply can't continue the journey. And sadly, that's exactly what happens. The Sadness takes control of Atreyu's horse, and the horse refuses to move another step. Then the horse starts sinking into the swamp. Atreyu tries desperately to pull him out, but he can't, and the horse dies. And here we see Bastian's reaction in the real world. He's completely crushed by the scene, and he starts crying hard after the horse dies. Atreyu forces himself to continue until he reaches Morla, but Morla is asleep. Bastian starts yelling out loud, and the crazy part is, his voice somehow reaches the book. Morla hears him and wakes up. Morla is extremely sensitive to children, and she keeps sneezing all over Atreyu. Then she tells him she can't help him. He has to go to the Southern Oracle, but before we continue, Bastian suddenly hears the school bell. The school day is over. All the students go home, except Bastian, who stays inside the school because a massive storm is raging outside. Back inside the story, Atreyu is now collapsing in the swamp, and that savage wolf is closing in, ready to finish him off. But then, out of nowhere, a dragon appears from the sky and saves Atreyu at the last second. A few days later, Atreyu wakes up and finds the dragon sleeping right next to him. Atreyu tries to sneak away quietly, but the dragon opens his eyes, and instead of attacking, he's actually super friendly. The dragon's name is Falkor, and Falkor decides to help Atreyu. He flies him to the home of two gnomes. They take care of Atreyu, treat his wounds, and help him recover. Then they guide him toward the oracle. But to meet the oracle, Atreyu has to pass through a gate, guarded by massive statues that burn anyone who gets too close. Still, Atreyu gathers all his courage and starts walking straight toward the gate. The second he approaches, the statues open their eyes and fire at him. But Atreyu dodges the blasts, keeps moving, and actually makes it through the first gate, only to discover there's a second gate waiting right behind it. And this one is terrifying, because it's a mirror, and it reflects your true self. Atreyu looks into the mirror, and what he sees shocks him. He sees Bastian sitting there, reading the book, and Bastian can see Atreyu too. Bastian freezes in fear and throws the book onto the floor. Finally, Bastian starts feeling like something is seriously wrong with this book. First, it was that strange thunderstorm, and now he can actually see the hero of the story and even hear his voice. Anyway, Atreyu keeps moving after he passes the mirror. Back in the attic, Bastian lights a few candles so he can keep reading without stopping. Atreyu finally reaches the oracle, and it turns out to be these huge, glowing statues. When he asks them how to save their world, they tell him the only way is for the Empress to be given a new name. But not just any name. The new name has to be chosen by a human child, a child who exists beyond the borders of Fantasia. So Atreyu flies with Falkor toward the edge of Fantasia, trying to reach those boundaries. They push through the clouds and reach the upper atmosphere, but they still can't go any farther. And then the worst thing happens. Atreyu loses his grip and falls off Falkor's back. What's happening inside the book triggers chaos in the real world too, and Bastian suddenly feels like the whole school is about to collapse on top of him. Atreyu wakes up and finds himself washed up on a shoreline. He gets up and starts searching for the dragon, and at the same time, Falkor is searching for Atreyu too. But somehow, they can't reach each other. Then Atreyu runs into the rock-eating giant again, and this time, the giant is sitting there crying. When Atreyu asks him what's wrong, the giant tells him his friends are dead, and he couldn't save them. And Atreyu can't really do anything for him either, because yeah, there's nothing to fix. They're gone. Atreyu keeps moving, and he starts noticing strange markings painted on the walls. But when he looks closer, he realizes the drawings are literally showing his entire journey through Fantasia, every step he's taken. And that's when the savage wolf finally appears. His name is G-Mork, and he tells Atreyu he's here for one reason: to kill him. Then G-Mork drops the truth. Fantasia has no borders because Fantasia is built from human imagination. And as humans lose hope in their dreams, their imagination turns darker and darker. That's why there's no hope left. And right after he says that, G-Mork attacks. He lunges at Atreyu and hits him with a brutal, almost fatal wound. At that exact moment, Falkor is down in the water searching for Atreyu, and instead of finding him, he finds Atreyu's amulet. A little later, Falkor finally reaches Atreyu's location and saves him. On the way back, they start realizing the truth. The Nothing has already wiped out Fantasia. There's nothing left. Just emptiness. Atreyu immediately blames himself. He's convinced all of this happened because of him, that he's the reason the whole world was destroyed. So he turns to his amulet and asks it to take him to a place called the Ivory Tower. And there, he meets the Empress. A little girl. Atreyu apologizes. He tells her he failed. He couldn't find the cure, and he couldn't save Fantasia. But the Empress shocks him. She tells him he didn't fail at all. Then she starts talking about the human child, and she tells him something even crazier. The human child has been with him the entire journey. Atreyu is confused. He starts looking around trying to figure out who this human child is, not realizing that the human child is actually Bastian. But the Empress says it clearly. The child's name is Bastian, and he's sitting there right now reading the book. Bastian is stunned. He can't believe what he's reading. And right then, the storm in the real world gets so violent that it smashes the window glass. While on the other side, everything in Fantasia is collapsing at the same time. The Empress begs Bastian to give her a new name because that's the only way to save them. So Bastian finally chooses a new name for her and screams it at the top of his lungs, but it feels like it's already too late. Then the Empress appears to Bastian in the real world and tells him the truth. Fantasia has collapsed and there's nothing left, except a single grain of sand. "Take it," she says. And then she asks him to use his powerful imagination to create a brand new Fantasia from scratch. And that's exactly what happens. Bastian climbs onto Falkor's back and flies with him, rebuilding Fantasia again, using nothing but his wild imagination. Soon, Bastian realizes Fantasia is truly back. The world is restored and all the creatures return to life, even Atreyu. At that point, Falkor tells him he can ask for any wish he wants. And Bastian decides to use Falkor in the real world to chase down the bullies who attacked him at the beginning of the movie. After that, we hear the narrator say that Bastian kept making many more wishes in the real world before Falkor finally left. And of course, we'll leave the rest to your imagination, so you can guess what he wished for. And with that, we've reached the end of today's film.